It seemed to be an ordinary day, with nothing out of the ordinary. The tram was in chaos. There were a lot of unusual, strange objects all around. The situation resembled a movie set. Suddenly, a goblin armed with an axe appeared among the people. But this day promised to turn our gambler hero's perception of reality upside down, opening the gates to a real hell. His hands were shaking with terror. He tried in vain to call the police. The goblins began their bloody hunt, ruthlessly killing everyone who came into their sight. Panic-stricken passengers on the tram couldn't take their eyes off this horrific massacre. The gambler felt helpless, knowing what was coming next, and could not find peace. He realized that no one in this tram would escape death. All of them would soon become victims, lying on the floor, covered in blood, killed by goblins. The goblins, these ruthless killers who do not discriminate between children and adults, have already killed 80% of Seoul's population. The hero is faced with the question, will he be able to survive in the midst of this apocalypse? Unfortunately, Kim Hyuk-jin's talent in the world of players was considered nothing. Absolute zero. The attacking goblins were incredibly strong and skilled with their weapons. Seoul, 2028. The weather is beautiful outside, and the majestic buildings cut out against the sky, creating the impression of a fairy tale city. The main character's name was Kim Hyuk-jin. He was 30 years old, and for 7 years he had been trying unsuccessfully to pass the civil service exams. 10 years ago, when the gates of another world opened in Seoul, terrible events engulfed the city. Only a small group of survivors were able to wake up in a new reality, called players. Kim also had a dream of becoming a player, but he resigned himself to his lack of talent and focused on preparing for his exams. One young man was watching Kim, discussing him with a friend standing nearby. They were discussing that Kim had once taken a player's aptitude test, collecting 67 talent panels, which was a Korean record. They mentioned that he was nicknamed the Dead Genius for such an achievement. Usually talent panels close by the age of 20, and he was already 30, so you could say that he had already lost his future. Unexpectedly, Kim received a postcard with the results of a repeat test he had taken 7 years ago as a last attempt to discover his abilities. He was holding an official document from the government that could determine whether or not he had gambling talent. Passing this test allowed to estimate the total number of talents and their possible discovery, but the results showed only one talent, which for Kim was worse than the complete absence of any ability. He couldn't understand why the head of the Players Association's department had personally come to give him these results. It was the line between dream and reality, and because of this, hopes of becoming a player seemed to him an exorbitant luxury. His room was in the usual mess. He did not expect anything good from the next day, surrounded by mountains of unwashed dishes. On the wall hung a photo of him with his mother, adding a special atmosphere to the room. He sat down at the table, picked up a pencil, and opened a remote lesson on his phone. The topic of the lesson was to discuss the horrific events that occurred at the beginning of the disaster. In the video, the lecturer reported horrifying statistics. Out of 150,000 people affected by the disaster, only 5,000 survived. With each passing minute, Kim became more and more fascinated by this man's story. This man, who appeared in the video, played a key role at the beginning of the disaster 10 years ago. Now he is a world-famous player. Whether it was 10 years ago or now, everyone agrees on one thing. This man is living proof that dreams can come true. The words of this man in the classroom, which Kim heard while watching the video, deeply impressed him and made him think. Thoughts of his own lack of strength plagued him, but he tried to fight them. He realized that if he had the talent, he could have awakened as a player, received an offer from the guardian, and made his life worthwhile. However, the thought arose that he was to blame for his failures. From the envelope, he pulled out a letter from his mother. This letter was written long ago when she was still alive, but only now Kim dared to read it. The letter from his mother revealed their tragic story. She died of an illness, leaving him to cope with grief and poverty alone. His older sister, trying to escape poverty, got a job at a semiconductor factory, but only got leukemia due to the hazardous working conditions, and now she spent time in the hospital under drips. Spurred on by these events, Kim set out to succeed for his family, despite his lack of resources, connections, money, and talent. Having already failed the exam 3 times, he felt discouraged, but he did not lose hope. Every night when he went to bed, he dreamed about his goals, intending to put all his efforts into achieving them. Time went on, and his dreams echoed with thoughts about the future, whether he would be able to change his life. He wondered if he would ever be able to make his life better, even through his dreams, looking for answers. Loneliness weighed heavily on him, and although it was already dawn and almost 6 a.m., he felt extremely lonely. Although he had gone to bed early, he slept through the important day when his midterm was due. Determined not to give up, he quickly took a shower and headed to the academy, determined to turn his life around. He hugs his phone uncomfortably as he sits at the bus stop and shares the news with his mother. The bus is late, but he does not lose hope. A promise appears on the faintly lit bus schedule. The bus should arrive soon, raising a little hope. The environment around him exudes mystery, making this day especially unusual in his eyes, as if hiding something indescribably mystical. When the bus finally appears, he climbs on board, feeling an indefinable difference between this morning and all the others, which raises many questions for him. As he begins to board, he mindlessly leans his phone against the special device, paying for his fare, immersing himself in his usual activities. Despite the outwardly ordinary morning and the cloudy weather that the forecasts promised, the people around him, deep in their phone conversations, did not seem too concerned. He opened his notebook in front of him, having just settled into his seat, to review and dive deeper into the material from yesterday's lesson. The lesson was about the cataclysm that began 10 years ago and its consequences for the world, which continues to preoccupy his thoughts. He was most fascinated by the detail of how, with the onset of the initial fog, a new era of learning began, opening up unexplored possibilities. His curiosity is fueled by today's strange weather, which reminds him of those mystical circumstances when everything important began. The tram passengers simultaneously turned their eyes to the window, concerned by the sight of the unusually thick fog that suddenly appeared outside. No weather forecast had ever predicted this. The fog was thickening rapidly, promising unpredictable consequences. Suddenly, an unpleasant smell, similar to a sewer, penetrated inside, forcing him to try to cover his nose to avoid the stench. The situation seemed strange to him not only because of the smell. When he received a message on his phone, he was shocked by the content. A reminder of the thick fog in the city of Seoul on February 27, 2018, which could lead to accidents. Reading this alert, he could hardly believe in the reality of what was happening. Everything indicated that the disaster had started again, repeating the events of the past. It turned out that the entire area, including Gwanghwamun, was covered in fog and a foul odor, evidence of something dangerous. There were already 145 victims on the streets out of a possible 150, making the situation even more tragic. He realized that he had gone back in time and knew what was going to happen next, which gave him confidence in his next steps. An instruction on the scoreboard appeared above his head. The players needed to start training. 10 years ago, Cheono-sul became the scene of an unprecedented phenomenon known as the first drill, when monsters emerged from the dungeon. The unexpected eruption of monsters from the dungeon led to a bloody massacre in which humanity was forced to fight for survival. This week-long cataclysm, later called the Exodus, claimed the lives of nearly 150,000 people in the Jono area, becoming one of the most tragic events in history. The chances of survival were only 3%. It was one of the most difficult days in human history, a test that the entire civilization was facing. However, over time, players emerged. Special people who were able to effectively confront the monsters, making a significant contribution to the fight against the disaster that befell Chono. They created detailed location guides and recorded their battles, which allowed them to develop a virtual dungeon to practice battle strategies. The world began to recover from the cataclysm, and the protagonist became the author of numerous records of raids and went through the virtual dungeon hundreds of times, gaining invaluable experience. Only a few could match him in understanding that event, as he had every chance to become the best player in the world thanks to his experience and knowledge. The training was about to start again, and the players needed to get ready. Our hero still could not believe that he was in the past. Panic reigned in the minibus. People, not understanding what was happening, were losing control of themselves, anticipating new challenges. Sitting in the minibus, he maintained an outwardly calm demeanor, but he was panicking inside. He realized that the other passengers, unaware of the cataclysm, did not feel the same fear, which made him the only player among them. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a mysterious voice. An unknown observer has taken an interest in you. This made him tense. These beings watching the players decide the fates by distributing bonuses and privileges. They exist in a dimension that is one level higher, inaccessible to ordinary people. The player was granted a unique bonus called Eyes of a Cold-Blooded Observer, which significantly increased his chances of survival. The training quest will begin in 10 seconds, the announcement reads. The bus driver, having stopped the bus because of the thick fog, apologized to the passengers and asked them to continue on their own. When the countdown reached 5 seconds, the player urged everyone not to get off, but to quickly lie down on the floor. At the second of the countdown, the passengers froze in fright, standing in the aisle of the minibus, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly, a portal opened right in the middle of the bus, and the figure of a woman with snow-white hair began to appear. It was a mid-level administrator known as Ksenia, and her startling appearance shocked everyone present. Ksenia introduced herself to the passengers, informing them about the beginning of the training, and that they are now part of this unknown world. A blue card appears in front of the player, informing them that they cannot leave the training zone, and the number of survivors will determine the future difficulty of the tasks. The passengers, bewildered and disbelieving in the reality of the events, perceived the situation as a joke. Standing in front of Ksenia, they demanded explanations, hoping for an easy solution. Ksenia firmly informed them that the only task during the training was to use all possible strength to survive. The atmosphere of tension reached its peak when a man, covered in blood, crashed into the windshield of the bus with a fatal head injury. The player, maintaining his outward calm, silently watched the events unfold, analyzing the situation. Soon an army of goblins arrived at the scene, ready to attack. The first groups of goblins were already preparing to storm the Chano district. Some of the goblins had already settled on the roof of the bus, causing panic among the passengers, who barely realized the scale of the threat. The player realized that an outside massacre was inevitable. The main thing now was to find a shelter and put off thinking about the chances of survival for later. A direct battle with goblins without preparation and strategy is a real death sentence that could have been avoided only thanks to the experience of the last 10 years. Sitting on the seat, the player continued to look for the best solution that would help him and the other passengers survive in this chaos. The goblins, armed to the teeth and with sharp fangs, were on the verge of breaking through to the middle of the bus, ready to attack. One of them, using a hammer, smashed the glass of the bus door, causing the barrier between humans and monsters to instantly break down. The people closest to the door felt the most fear, and panic quickly spread throughout the bus. The player, Kim, tried to calm everyone down, urging them to lie down on the floor, but his voice was lost among the screams and chaos that engulfed the passengers. At this critical moment, a status window opened in front of Kim, showing his low strength and level 1. A sudden loud sound from the side distracted Kim from watching his stats, causing him to look around. He saw that the goblins were already breaking through the bus's defenses and launching their brutal attack. The passengers, terrified, screamed and begged for help, trying to escape the bloodthirsty creatures. The goblins were relentless, killing everyone who came within their reach, indiscriminately, sparing no one. These creatures were absolutely ruthless, with one single mission: to leave no one alive who got in their way. Kim seemed to be lying lifeless on the floor, successfully faking death, while one of the goblins came over to make sure he was dead. The goblin, deciding that Kim was dead, lost interest in him and walked away, giving the player the opportunity to go unnoticed. When the goblin turned away, Kim cautiously opened his eyes, realizing that his strategy had worked thanks to the eye of the cold-blooded observer, which allowed him to temporarily turn into a dead man. He reminded himself that in the exercise there are conditionally safe zones, one of which was on this particular bus, designated as the green circle. In order to maintain the safety status of this zone, it was important to remain motionless, so Kim did not make any unnecessary movements while lying on the floor. Despite the fear and tension, he remained calm, realizing that any rash movement could deprive him of this protection. The Eye of the Cold-Blooded Observer bonus he received in the open beta functioned as an invisible shield that protected him from threats. Although Kim didn't know all the details of his new ability while lying on the floor, he realized that it gave him a chance to survive. He expected the first wave of the goblins' attack to last about 10 minutes, according to the knowledge he had gained from the future. For the first 5 minutes, the goblins actively searched for victims, breaking into the bus and starting their destructive raid. One of the goblins approached Kim, who was lying motionless on the floor, with distrust. The creature timidly touched his cheek with its wet and cold tongue, trying to determine if there was still life in him. Only when the goblin retreated did Kim receive an unexpected message. The brave Lion King is sending a strength-enhancing elixir. He carefully pulled out a small glass bottle with a mysterious green liquid from his pocket. The elixir from the brave Lion King was a rarity that granted the user an incredible strength boost for 10 minutes, increasing their strength by as much as 6 points. Holding the second bonus in front of him, Kim looked at it with interest, pondering the possibilities. By drinking the elixir, Kim could gain an additional 2 characteristic points for each level increase. Drinking this elixir promised an effect equivalent to 3 levels of strength increase, which could turn him into a real warrior. At that moment, Kim faced a real prospect of changing the situation in his favor. Determination flared in his eyes, because now he realized that with his new strength he had every chance of defeating the goblins in a fair fight. An inner voice, like a guardian's advice, whispered to him that he should fight. Kim looked up at the goblins lurking nearby with a new sense of determination. He had a choice: attack the goblins, risking everything, or wait and hope for the best. There were only a few seconds left before fate would decide everything for him. At that time, the brave Lion King decided to personally communicate with Kim, inviting him to a conversation with the game administrator, which promised a new turn of events. The administrator suddenly appeared in front of Kim, a girl with gentle wings, who handed him a direct request from the brave Lion King, expressed in a soft but resolute voice. Among all the guardians of the virtual world, the brave Lion King was famous for his ruthless bravery and indefatigable fighting spirit, often forcing players to throw themselves into the arms of danger without any regard for the consequences. But the administrator announced that the deal with the Lion King had already been made. The current safe zone would be marked and closed in 30 seconds, leaving little time for reflection. Kim quickly realized that, given his rebellious nature, the brave Lion King could cancel the safe zone at any time, putting his life at risk. If the guard changes the rules of the game, shouldn't the players be compensated accordingly? He asked, trying to find a loophole in the situation. Kim began to argue his position, noting that the administrator could not ignore the existing rules, especially when players' lives were at stake. The administrator was obviously surprised by Kim's persistence and knowledge of the rules of the game. Without losing his resolve, Kim continued to insist on following the laws that were established in this world. Her surprise grew, because the last time someone had referred to the laws of the game had been so long ago that almost everyone had forgotten about their existence. Now Kim stood in front of the administrator, tensely awaiting her response, ready for any development. Not receiving an immediate answer, Kim pointed decisively at the administrator, emphasizing that their conversation had cost him precious 10 seconds, and demanded that this time should also be compensated. With an unexpected warmth in her voice, she said his name, catching his attention. "You're right," she said, agreeing with him. According to the laws of the game, the safe zone would remain active for another 10 seconds after their conversation ended. As a bonus, Kim received a bottle of high-quality weapon-sharpening grease and a rusty iron sword, which, although not very strong, only 2 and 5 points, could be useful in difficult circumstances. Kim decided to take everything he could, because any weapon could come in handy now. The portal through which the administrator had appeared began to close. The goblins' first attack was over, and they scattered in a hurry, leaving the bus. As they fled, the goblins left only chaos and destruction behind. The conversation with the receptionist gave Kim valuable time to survive, allowing him to avoid a collision with the goblin crowd and, as a result, survive. Soon after, a blue notification appeared in front of him, stating that the brave Lion King was deeply disappointed at the lack of a battle. There were many victims left on the bus who had not withstood the goblin invasion, reminding him of the cruelty and trials that this attack had brought. At this critical moment, Kim focused all his thoughts on one goal: to survive. He gathered his courage, preparing for the inevitable trials that lay ahead. He quickly approached the bus door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock seemed to be blocked or broken. With a lot of effort, Kim managed to open the door, overcoming the resistance of the broken lock. A real test of survival awaited him. He remembered that there was a grocery store nearby where he could find food and water, as his 3 years of training had taught him the area well. The street was in chaos. Kim ran past scattered cars and debris, and the fog made it difficult to see. The bus was the only landmark in this chaos. It kept running, stopping from time to rest, leaning on parked cars. Despite being surrounded by dead bodies, Kim felt strangely calm. Perhaps it was the effect of his eye of the cold-blooded observer skill. Suddenly, a small hand came out from under the car next to his leg. Kim flinched in surprise. He cautiously bent down to get a better look at who was hiding there. His heart was beating faster with excitement. A child, about 13 or 14 years old, crawled out from under the car, with frightened eyes begging for help. "Please save me," she whispered, holding out her trembling hands to Kim. Observing the situation, Kim could not believe his eyes. Not only was he looking at a child who had survived the disaster, but also at a goblin that seemed to have disappeared after the first attack. This caused some chaos in his understanding of the rules of the game. The goblin, which appeared as if from nowhere, held a knife at the girl's leg, threatening her. This situation was unpredictable and required immediate action. The girl, with tears in her eyes, begged for help, looking Kim straight in the eye. Her gaze was full of fear and despair. Kim, standing over her, listened to her pleas. He hesitated, assessing the situation and the possible risks. He wondered why the girl was not yet injured, despite the presence of the goblin. This could indicate that she had some special bonus or ability. Her screams of fear that resounded in the air indicated deep fear, not physical pain. Perhaps she was also a participant in this chaotic world with her own unique abilities. At that moment, the Administrator Angel appeared in front of Kim again, warning that even if this goblin was only a child of its kind, it would not be easy to defeat it at the initial level. She also hinted that a talent like the girl's was rare, and even the King of Fists would be jealous of such an ability at the initial stage. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Kim realized that if he did not take immediate action, other goblins might soon arrive, which would undoubtedly lead to tragedy. Realizing that there is little time to think, Kim has to make a decision. Act immediately to protect the girl or find another way to resolve this threatening situation. At the crucial moment, Kim quickly opened his inventory to find the rusty sword, weapon grease, and power-up elixir he had been given earlier. Swinging the rusty sword, he aimed his strike at the goblin's vulnerable point, right in the neck from behind to deliver a fatal blow without taking any unnecessary risks. The blow was precise and deadly, and the goblin fell lifeless to the ground, a testament to Kim's difficult choice to protect life at all costs. The girl who watched the battle was shocked and touched by Kim's determination. For defeating the goblin, Kim gained experience that could help him in further trials of this dangerous world. As he returned to the girl, he saw that his shirt was stained with the blood of the enemy, which only emphasized the cruelty of their situation. He ordered the girl to stand up, not wanting to leave her in danger without protection. Warning her that he could not wait too long, he encouraged her to move with him, emphasizing the importance of working together for survival. Motivated and with a sense of urgency, the girl quickly got up, promising to follow him. Moving forward, Kim led the way to a safer place, and the girl followed, feeling not only a protector, but also a reliable ally in this uncertain world. Upon reaching the supermarket, Kim cautiously stopped in front of the entrance and strictly warned the girl that it was dangerous to open the door under any circumstances. His gaze was full of seriousness. The look on the girl's face expressed absolute horror and fear that gripped her completely. Kim realized that in such a situation, fear is a completely natural reaction. She could barely contain the trembling in her body, feeling indescribable fear of the unknown that awaited them. Suddenly, in the middle of their conversation, a blue alert window appeared, warning them of the approaching second wave of goblin attacks, causing them to freeze. Kim asked the girl to carefully read the information on the window. She did as he asked, and he realized that he was right. She really had an unusual talent. Usually, information about setting up a safe zone was only available before the second attack, and this place was supposed to be their refuge. But Kim had heard that players with unique abilities could see alternative safe zones, such as a hospital. Later, a new message appeared, even more mysterious, announcing the opening of an additional safe zone. A second wave of goblin attacks began, raising the tension in the air. Kim once again urgently warned the girl about the importance of not opening the door during the attack, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. The last message about the completion of the safe zone setup sounded like a sign that they could finally breathe a sigh of relief, at least for a short time. Behind the closed doors of the supermarket, through the glass, Kim watched the goblins wandering down the street, shrouded in the primeval fog. The scene outside the window resembled a picture of the apocalypse. People unable to reach safe zones were in a state of desperate defense. Their attempts to survive seemed futile in the face of ruthless creatures that left no chance of survival. A small group of survivors noticed the light in the supermarket and rushed to the door, knocking and begging for shelter. But their requests sounded like a sentence in this desperate situation. Every minute more and more people gathered at the door, which only increased the risk of attracting the goblins' attention. Inside, behind the door, Kim and the girl stood breathless, feeling the weight of responsibility for their decision. Kim had a sword in his hand, ready to fight the goblins if any of them tried to get inside. Watching the scene from the outside was incredibly painful. People begging for help were falling one by one at the hands of the goblins, who were inexorably approaching. Realizing that opening the door would destroy the safe zone and lead to the deaths of everyone inside, Kim made the agonizing decision not to let anyone in, keeping at least some hope of survival. Despair and powerlessness enveloped them both, especially the girl, whose trembling grew stronger in the face of the horrors unfolding before them. These events will forever leave a deep mark on Kim's memory, becoming a test that will determine his future path in this world of trials and struggle for survival. Standing outside the supermarket, witnessing the apocalyptic chaos in the streets, Kim felt deeply resentful of the system that threw them into this cruel world and the guards who stood idly by. A vow of revenge was born in Kim's heart against those responsible for this disaster. He promised himself that he would do everything possible to make those behind the chaos pay. For 6 hours after the second goblin attack, the situation on the streets did not change. Chaos and destruction continued to reign everywhere. All these hours, Kim and the girl remained in relative safety inside the supermarket, supporting each other in this difficult time. Later, the girl approached Kim to express her gratitude for the rescue and introduced herself as Kang Seong-hwa, who was 14 years old. Kim interrupted her, saying that his help was not unselfish and he could not guarantee her safety throughout the ordeal that lay ahead. His words were harsher than he intended, and they provoked the girl's fear of being left to fend for herself. When Kang Seong-hwa cried out, begging him not to leave her alone, Kim realized that his words might have sounded too harsh. He explained that he could not promise her complete protection for the rest of their journey, as even his own survival was in doubt. But what was important was his assurance that he would not push her away unless her presence was an immediate threat to his life, which was at least some comfort to Kang Seong-hwa in this uncertain world. Kim strongly suggested that Kang Seong-hwa rest, emphasizing the need to be rested before leaving the supermarket the next day, as they would be facing a new stage of survival the next day. As Kim was preparing to leave, a message appeared in front of him with a list of safe zones: a school, a convenience store, a hospital, and an additional zone, the Gwangwamun Tower, which seemed to be of key importance. He carefully reviewed the information, contemplating which location would be the best choice for further shelter, and gathered his belongings in preparation for leaving in the morning. When they finally opened the doors of the supermarket, Kang Seong-hwa stayed behind Kim, ready to follow his lead. What they saw beyond the threshold resembled a scene from their worst nightmares. The streets were covered with corpses and the air was permeated with the smell of death and despair. A picture of the apocalypse was unfolding before them, which shocked even the experienced Kim. Kang Seong-hwa tried to keep her cool, but her eyes spoke of inner fear. The city that was once full of life had now turned into a wasteland, where the only witnesses to the events were soulless bodies. Seeing the fear in the girl's eyes, Kim realized how much the situation had affected her psyche. He asked her to be very careful and beware of the dangers that could lurk at every step of their journey. He emphasized the importance of caution in this dangerous world. Kim instructed Kang Seong-hwa to warn him of any danger or unusual things she noticed during their journey. They hadn't gone far when the girl pointed out a strange creature right in their path. It was a jelly that was moving in the middle of the road. Kim was surprised to meet a slime so quickly. These creatures were considered neutral monsters, so their threat level was not clearly indicated. He regarded the slime as easy prey, and using a rusty sword he quickly cut it in two. Having destroyed the jelly, Kim received some coins and additional experience, which was a small but pleasant reward. While using the sword, Kim felt a strange DGC-vu, as if his hands remembered his old fighting skills, even though this was his first real fight with a sword. The appearance of the rusty iron sword notification reminded him of the weapon's modest performance, but that didn't stop him from fighting. On the way, they encountered another jelly, and Kim easily dealt with it, making it the 5th monster he had destroyed in a row. His level increased, bringing 2 bonus characteristic points and 1 bonus random characteristic point, which was a significant improvement in his abilities. When Kim began to emit a faint glow after leveling up, Kang Seong-hwa asked what was going on, not understanding the nature of the phenomenon. When she found out that you can level up by destroying monsters, her surprise knew no bounds. Her promise to herself to become stronger sparkled in her eyes like a light of newborn determination. Swinging his sword, which felt strangely familiar in his hands, he cut through the jelly monsters with such agility that it was as if he were dancing with death to the rhythm of a long-forgotten waltz. His level increased, reaching the 3rd level. This fact flashed before his eyes like a badge of honor engraved on a warrior's shield. The speed with which he raised his level surprised even himself, leaving a trace of indescribable intrigue in the back of his mind. Again, the message came about the bonus point of a random characteristic, challenging his ability to adapt for the 2nd time. The King of Fists, mentioned in ancient records as a warrior who had passed through trials by fire and sword, involuntarily resonated in his memory. Turning the pages of the past, he recalled the repeated tests that had brought down the thunder of unrecognized talent on him until the door to the talent panel opened. Now he was beginning to realize that he might be an early bloomer, a player who shows unprecedented growth at the dawn of his career. As they walked along, they did not notice the figure of the administrator materialize behind them, like a shadow coming from the depths of the night. Having reached the 3rd level, he somehow attracted the attention of the guards, becoming the center of the whirlwind of events. The realization that he could be an early bloomer filled him with unwavering determination. With his sword in hand, which was already beginning to lose its luster, he rushed into battle with renewed vigor, as if this particular test would decide his fate. Another jelly monster fell before him, split in half by a powerful stroke of his sword that sliced through the air with an ease he had never experienced before. With each swing, his blows became only stronger, as if each enemy that fell at his hand added to his strength. The fire of struggle burned in his eyes as he cut through the monsters one by one, holding in his heart the knowledge of an elixir that could heal mana in 3 years. This goal, worth billions, was the beacon that guided them through the darkness. As he approached the tower where he continued his relentless fight against the slimes, his level skyrocketed to level 5, providing him with 2 additional bonus characteristic points. Discovering the system's new feature of creating groups after reaching level 5, he immediately sent an invitation to his companion to join. She soon became part of the group, attracting the attention of a mysterious observer whose intentions remained a mystery. Promising support, she showed an unbending will to help him despite all obstacles. Watching her, he couldn't help but feel pity for her. But at the same time, his thoughts were preoccupied with his own survival and the challenges ahead. In the tower, where an extremely strong monster was waiting for them, he realized that he would not be able to protect her in a direct fight, which called into question their joint ability to survive. Observing the unusual animal among the ruins, the girl asked her companion anxiously if it was a monster. A level 3 urban fox appeared in front of them, a creature that had neutral intentions but a specific ability. It's a neutral monster that can provoke others to attack. It's better to go around it, the player whispered. But the situation suddenly turned out not in their favor. One of the foxes sank its teeth into her arm, and the others began to attack from all sides, creating a chaotic whirlwind of pain and panic. Grabbing his sword, he rushed to her aid, but noticed that despite the attacks, the girl was not injured, although the situation was becoming more and more threatening. Scattering the enemies with light sword movements, he freed the girl from the claws of the foxes, showing true martial arts skill. She watched as the blue energy enveloped him again, giving him strength and confidence in every movement. Killing the foxes had raised his level, which came as a surprise and a challenge for him to continue. An administrator appeared behind him, mysteriously asking about his level, as if measuring his potential with a single glance. When he replied that he had reached level 8, the administrator could barely hide his surprise, as this progress was far beyond expectations. An unfamiliar observer hidden in the shadows of the world expressed deep surprise at the player's growth rate, while the anonymous guards exchanged amazed glances, feeling that they had witnessed something out of the ordinary. The player himself considered his rapid progress to be somewhat strange, as if his path was ahead of the generally accepted norms of the world. Calling up the status window in front of him, he confirmed his suspicions. The characteristics for the 8th level looked too impressive, not as he expected. Despite the unusualness of the situation, the player took it as a great opportunity to open up new horizons. Turning to the girl, he pointed to a huge building, explaining that their next goal would be the dungeon of this tower, promising unprecedented trials and adventures. After explaining the plan of action inside the dungeon, he emphasized the importance of following his instructions, as their survival would depend on it. As he continued his way to the tower, he kept killing city foxes, each of which brought him valuable experience. His status window was already showing impressive numbers. Level 8, Stamina 14, Strength 14, Dexterity 14, Intelligence 14, Perception 14, Spirit 13. He gave the girl an old pair of iron gauntlets he had obtained during one of their hunts, signaling the completion of their training and readiness to execute the plan. Before entering the dungeon, he confidently told her that it was time to go deeper. The girl's response was full of trepidation, but her voice was determined. Okay. Standing in front of the entrance to Tower D's training dungeon, they noticed a sign stating that they needed to reach level 5 to enter, which only emphasized the seriousness of their mission. An interactive question sign appeared in front of them. Do you really want to enter Tower D? His choice was unwavering. After confirming their choice, they found themselves together on the threshold of the tower, ready to go through the training dungeon that opened before them. Opening the door, they saw a battlefield before them. Goblins and foxes ruled the space, creating chaos and unpredictability. Acting according to the plan, she dared to attack the goblins first, fortified by the iron gauntlets that gave her confidence. The goblins were the first real test for her, but she rushed into battle with confidence and determination. Face to face with the aggressive goblins, she bravely repelled their attacks without wasting a second. It turned out that by attacking the goblins, they would avoid the first attack from the foxes, which gave them a strategic advantage. Watching her actions, the player couldn't help but admire her abilities. She coped with the challenges even better than he expected, showing real fighting talent. Despite the goblin's attempts to harm her, she easily exceeded all expectations, demonstrating not only courage, but also impressive skills in combat. The player warned the girl about the approaching mini-boss that would appear after all the goblins and foxes on the first floor were killed, emphasizing the need to continue fighting without rest. She rushed into the battle with renewed fervor, decisively dealing with every goblin and fox that came her way, demonstrating extraordinary courage and bravery. The heads of the foxes, which were pressed into the floor under her onslaught, were a testament to her unbridled fighting energy. Suddenly, the player's own pause effect activated, freezing everything around him and causing a series of messages to appear from anonymous observers and the Lion King expressing their surprise and interest. The pause effect created an instant pause in the zone, attracting the attention of not only the heroes of the story, but also mysterious characters from the game world. The administrator, having used a precious item to activate the pause, appeared in front of the player, asking if he had lost his mind, as such actions were extraordinary. Her curiosity about the player increased because of his behavior, which indicated that he had foreseen the events that were about to take place. The administrator thought his actions were unreasonable because summoning the mini-boss, a level 13 goblin soldier, could have unpredictable consequences. Emphasizing that the mini-boss had enhanced characteristics, the administrator hinted at the great danger he posed. Following the administrator's warning, the player realized that at their current level, even with the girl, they would not be able to defeat such a strong opponent. Undaunted by the administrator's disagreement, the player asked her if she really cared about his fate. Her piercing look, full of incomprehension of his words, only confirmed his guess. He became a character who was the focus of not only the administrator's attention, but the entire game. Administrator Senya recognized that his ability to predict events made him exceptional, but also potentially dangerous to the stability of their world. The player, looking steadfastly into her eyes, realized that his success was important to the administrator because she was counting on his abilities in the future. He allowed himself to think that if she was so light on his life, then perhaps her own career in the game administration was not so successful. Interrupting her, he said that no matter what, he would defeat the goblin boss, demonstrating his determination and self-confidence. He promised that his victory would make her famous and respected among her colleagues, and her show would become an unprecedented success. However, he set a condition. If he was to help her achieve this, he wanted the deal on his terms. The administrator was overcome with anger, and she showed her power by creating a yellow ball of fire in her hand, ready to use it against the player for insubordination. However, her anger quickly subsided and she calmed down, asking him what kind of deal he was offering, ready to listen to his terms. Meanwhile, the girl continued her way through the ranks of the enemies without wasting a minute, raising her level to the 7th, which further strengthened her position in this dangerous game. Thanks to the girl's efforts, all the monsters on the stage were defeated, and she called the player to her side to report her success. She enthusiastically ran up to him, sharing the news that all the enemies were killed, and now they were ready to meet the mini-boss. The conditions for the appearance of the mini-boss, a goblin soldier, were met, and they noticed his huge feet already standing on the threshold of the front door to the room. The goblin soldier appeared, creating a monster boss zone around him, surrounded by his subjects, small goblins. When the player saw the mini-boss, he realized that in reality it was much bigger and more threatening than he could have imagined. The monster swung his spear, preparing to attack, emphasizing the danger that awaited them. Hiding behind the wall, the player analyzes the situation, trying to find the most effective way to defeat the goblin. He realized that the key to victory is to avoid a spear attack that crashed into the wall next to them with great force. After dodging the attack, the player stood up, preparing for a counterattack, and signaled to the girl that he was ready to take action. Together with the girl, they faced the challenge, joining forces to start the battle with the mini-boss, each of them ready for their role in the upcoming confrontation. Turning to the administrator, who was watching the scene from the rear, the challenging player said that she would witness how he, a level 8 player, could defeat the mini-boss, emphasizing his determination and self-confidence. The player stepped forward to meet the goblin boss, preparing for the battle with a rusty sword in his hands, symbolizing not only his courage, but also his readiness to face the trials of fate. The goblin soldier, holding his weapon, was preparing for a decisive strike, demonstrating his superiority in weapons and fighting skills. The mini-boss made a deadly throw of his spear, which turned out to be much more threatening than expected, forcing the player and the girl to reassess their strategy. After a failed attempt to hit the spear, the goblin did not hesitate to rush at the survivors, seeking to resolve the battle with a quick attack. The player had to prepare for 2 types of goblin attacks, a piercing spear, or a powerful swing, which required maximum concentration and reaction. The goblin missed the swing, and the spear flew only a few centimeters away from the player's back, which was a real test of his agility. Having barely avoided the attack, the player managed to launch a counterattack, although he was only able to lightly wound the goblin without causing significant damage. This small success only enraged the mini-boss more, who was preparing for a new, even more aggressive attack, determined to deliver a critical blow. The goblin, burning with anger, was preparing to make a decisive piercing with his spear, raising the stakes in this battle where every move could decide the fate of the fight. The player, having gathered all his will and strength, prepares for a decisive attack on the goblin, trying to find a weak spot in the mini-boss's defense. Meanwhile, the girl finds herself in a difficult situation, surrounded by a pack of foxes and small goblins who are attacking her from all sides in a coordinated manner. One of the foxes made a decisive leap and bit her on the neck, which added to her pain and made it difficult to defend herself against the rest of the monsters. The situation has attracted the attention of a huge number of anonymous observers, as well as the administrator himself, who are watching the developments with tension and curiosity. The administrator, watching the player, began to doubt his ability to defeat the mini-boss, given his allegedly low 8th level. The player's movements were unusually skillful and efficient for a player of his level, causing surprise and disbelief among the observers. Suspicions that the player might have reached his level dishonestly began to emerge, as his combat actions were significantly different from those expected. Despite the huge disparity in size and strength, the player stood in front of the goblin, ready for a confrontation, holding his rusty weapon at the ready. He understood that direct attacks might not bring a quick victory over the boss, but properly targeted blows could significantly weaken his stamina. The goblin prepares for a mighty swing again, emphasizing his determination to end the fight with a victory over his opponents. Faced with a pack of goblins and foxes, the girl summoned all her strength and courage to survive this difficult battle. With a wave of her iron gauntlet, she used all her strength, striking one of the goblins right in the face, which was not only a turning point in the battle, but also brought her additional experience. Each of her blows became more confident and stronger, which allowed her to quickly raise her level, using every opportunity to gain an advantage over her enemies. The administrator, watching the development of events, was deeply impressed by the girl's courage and ability to withstand the superiority of her opponents. Meanwhile, each successful strike of the player not only damaged the mini-boss, but also increased its level, bringing it closer to the 9th. With each strike, the player's sword became more and more worn out, requiring him to be more careful and resourceful in battle. Leveling up allowed the player not only to improve his characteristics, but also to restore his health, which became a key factor in the strategy of survival in this difficult situation. The player, having made sure that the girl was ready to continue the fight, urged her to keep the enemies at bay, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Restoring each other's strength and increasing the chances of defeating the mini-boss. Having identified the goblin's weak point, the back of the neck, the player prepared to use this chance to the fullest, deciding to make a decisive blow. At this time, each blow struck by the girl significantly increased her experience, allowing her to quickly level up and become even stronger. The goblin, having gathered all his strength, made a powerful swing directed against his enemies, showing that he was not yet ready to give up without a fight. The player, analyzing the situation, realized that this was the attack he was most afraid of, but decided to face it head-on. The goblin's spear pierced the player's shoulder, causing him a severe blow, but at the same time it gave him an impetus to continue fighting. Despite the considerable damage received from this blow, the player found the strength not only to resist, but also to respond, and his level rapidly increased to 10th. Thanks to his stamina and desire to win, the player was able to pay back the goblin by making a decisive stab with his sword directly into its neck. Circling the goblin from behind, the player effectively sliced through its neck, delivering a critical blow that was decisive in this battle. The goblin, having lost its strength, let out a desperate cry, not expecting to be defeated by such seemingly insignificant opponents. Although the player's sword was almost destroyed, he found the last strength to use it to deliver the final, victorious blow, ending this epic battle. During the climactic strike, the sword broke and shattered into pieces. Stuck in the goblin's neck, the blade had no chance of being removed. He managed to cope with the mini-boss, a goblin warrior showing real skill. The victory was counted as a solo pass. His little friend is already rushing to congratulate him on his victory, beaming with joy. The level restriction in the training area has disappeared, allowing him to grow in strength again. He involuntarily hugs her, grateful for her tireless efforts in fighting the goblins and foxes. He has just fulfilled one of the conditions for revealing a secret achievement. In Guangguaman, the streets are filled with white foxes, creating a unique atmosphere. Other players face off against these urban predators, clearing the streets of the dangerous threat. The young man easily sends the fox to the other side with one punch, demonstrating his superiority. In the training area, this guy stands out for his incredible strength, causing admiration and awe in the hearts of others. After defeating the monsters, they noticed other players. The young man waved to them, inviting them to talk. Their eyes caught sight of a couple, a boy and a girl, who, having overcome the test of their strength, were resting on the street. After this test, the guardian, known as the woman with the scales, who personified absolute goodness, unlike the Lion King, preferred the safety of the players, generously supporting them. She sent her administrator to the player to deliver an important message. Upon arrival, the administrator began to use his yellow magic, infusing it into further actions. As a result, the player received an iron sword of normal quality and strength with an attack power of 4 out of 12, a bonus for defeating the monster. With the new sword, the hero was ready to face a level 7 urban wolf, feeling confident in his own abilities. But the hero's new goal was far beyond mere survival. A portal opened up in front of them, which became the way to the city. After passing through the portal, they found themselves in the city, where they met a surprised young man who was incredulous about their survival. Their meeting was the beginning of a new chapter. Although it was the first time the player saw this young man, he immediately recognized him as if they had known each other for a long time. He turned out to be the King of Fists, one of the 8 most famous players in Korea, who would later become a legend. The King of Fists, surrounded by a crowd of rescued people, curiously asked the players how they managed to survive in such conditions. He felt the potential in the boy, and offered him to join his team, considering him a valuable addition. The player replied that he and the girl could rely on each other and politely declined the offer, emphasizing their independence. The girl watched their interaction with interest. The King of Fists, surprised by this refusal, scratched the back of his head and, although regretful, respectfully wished the player good luck. The crowd behind them was amazed at the player's decision to refuse such an honor. Before he left, the player turned to the King of Fists and gave him some friendly advice. In his advice, he said that when facing a particularly strong monster, you should aim for the left eye, which made the King of Fists think twice. At first, the King of Fists did not understand the meaning of this advice, but after thinking about it, he expressed his gratitude, feeling that it could be useful. Despite the fact that the heroes had to move on, the girl's curiosity remained unsatisfied, and she asked anxiously if these people would manage without their help. The player reassured the girl, saying that the people around the King of Fists seemed strong enough, but they should keep their own safety in mind above all else. Despite the outward confidence, he realized that they had serious challenges to face. According to the King of Fists memoir, Yoo Hyun and a dozen survivors will find themselves in the dungeon of Tower D, where they will face difficult trials. After successfully completing the first level, their attempt to conquer the second floor will result in the appearance of an unexpected enemy, who will almost completely destroy the group, leaving Yoo Hyun as the only survivor. After receiving a title for completing the training and becoming the first person to clear the dungeons of Tower D, Yoo Hyun admits that attempting to pass the second floor was the biggest mistake of his life. Continuing his journey with the girl, the player realizes that this time, everything can be different, but joining them is too risky. The girl notices the monsters ahead and points at them, showing her attentiveness. Thanks to her keen eyesight, she can clearly see the wolves ahead and realizes that they must be stopped. The wolves let out a frightening roar, their eyes blazing with an unrelenting red light. Demonstrating mutual understanding and teamwork, they rush together to fight the wolves, holding their weapons tightly in their hands. The girl, like an experienced warrior, deftly killed one of the wolves with the first blow, showing extraordinary skill. The iron sword made it much easier for the player to fight monsters, making each blow more confident and effective. His new goal was not just to complete dungeons, but to remove the level limit, which required him to be focused and dedicated to the goal. The main goal was to reach level 10, which could be achieved by killing monsters and gaining experience. Wolves turned out to be much more valuable in terms of experience than foxes, allowing the player to level up faster. In the fight against wolves, the girl's bat proved to be more effective than any metal fists, giving her an advantage in battle. Killing these wolves allowed the player to reach level 11, becoming the first to reach this mark, setting the bar high for others. He was presented with a notification of the title of Discoverer for his achievement, honoring him as a pioneer. This honorary title, given to the pioneer of new territories, brings incredible bonuses, emphasizing his contribution to the exploration of the game world. After completing this level, they continued their journey forward, armed with a bat and an iron sword, ready for new challenges. From her vantage point, the administrator closely monitored the player and the girl's movements, studying their every move. Their ability to successfully navigate their way through the challenges attracted the attention of not only the administrator, but also the guardians, arousing their growing curiosity. After receiving a message from the guard, the administrator was ordered to conduct a full investigation to understand the essence of the player's success. The administrator did not lose her attention, continuing to follow the route of the heroes, trying to predict their next steps. Her interest and persistence were so pronounced that her emotional state became obvious. This interest deepened when she learned that the player was awarded the title of Discoverer. But the details of this title remained a mystery to her. The administrator faced difficulties trying to find out more about the player's title, as information about player titles remained confidential until the official announcement. Her job was made more difficult by the player's reluctance to share information, forcing her to keep the guard in suspense and anticipation. Today's route of the heroes was to Cheonggyecheon, and they planned to continue their journey there tomorrow. At the same time, a large number of people gathered near Gwanghwamun. The crowd's discussion of the newly discovered dungeon sparked excitement and speculation about the potential dangers and rewards that lay in its depths. The organizer tried to encourage people by emphasizing that while the unknown of the dungeon held risks, the changes in the world made those risks worth the great rewards. Having convinced the crowd of the prospect of a joint hike, the organizer invited everyone to unite and share the future loot. One by one, the crowd members began to agree with the plan, and expressed their willingness to act together with the aforementioned Shu Hyun. In the end, the collective spirit rose so high that everyone unanimously decided to set out on an adventure the next day, planning thorough preparations for the raid. Meanwhile, the player and the girl continued to effectively clear the streets of wolves, gaining experience and improving their skills. Repeated encounters with wolves allowed them to become much more agile and effective in combat, as the girl noticed. During the second day of their hiking, they reached level 12, killing monsters faster than they appeared, demonstrating incredible progress. As a result of their success in hunting wolves, they collected many useful items and coins. Among them was a rare trophy, the mutant wolf's call. Noticing a new wolf on the opposite side of the road, the girl pointed to it, saying that it was another enemy that had appeared out of the blue. Perhaps this wolf was the last one in the area. The player, grabbing his sword, approached the wolf with determination, ready to fight. His stroke was quick and accurate, cutting the wolf in two with one powerful swing. Suddenly, a red notification appeared in front of the player, announcing that all the conditions of the mysterious task had been met, reaching level 12, defeating 500 city wolves, and revealing the knowledge of the hidden figure. Immediately after that, the lycanthrope Wolf King appeared from under the asphalt through a red portal, causing surprise and anxiety. The player did not expect such a development and had to make a quick decision. Turning to the girl, he ordered her to run away immediately, sensing a serious threat. There was no time for explanations, only an urgent need to act to escape imminent danger. The lycanthrope, a huge wolf with iron claws, was much stronger than any monster they had ever faced before, making them feel helpless. His howl, which echoed throughout the city, became a warning to all its inhabitants. His cry is so powerful that the surrounding air explodes with energy, imposing a paralyzing howl effect on the players, enveloping them like invisible shackles. Under the weight of this unnatural pressure, the girl falls to the ground unsteadily, like a doll thrown by the inexorable hand of fate. The player, gathering the remnants of his strength, breaks free from the invisible burden, shouting out to his companion to seek shelter behind a nearby car. The silhouette of an unknown creature looms in the translucent haze that fills the field of view. But the belief that a lycanthrope could be hiding in the darkness would seem nothing more than delusion until they see it with their own eyes, endowed with a power beyond any known enemy. Trying to focus, the player realizes that the level of the enemy remains a mystery to him, as his own abilities are not sufficient for such a challenge. In the face of an imminent threat, the question arises of how to proceed, because the path to escape is already blocked, and only a feeling of overwhelming fear grows before your eyes. At this critical moment, like a brilliant flash, the player comes up with the idea to use the elixir of power, which soon turns him into a fighting machine ready for incredible achievements. Thanks to this decision, the player takes on the role of a great adventurer, implementing Jackson's legendary strategy, which seemed incredible to an ordinary person. The monster, like a monster from the deepest nightmares, instantly attacks, demonstrating its unearthly strength and speed, which make the player's heart freeze in anticipation of the inevitable clash. Meanwhile, the girl hidden behind the car does not miss a single detail of the battle, her eyes imperceptibly filled with a mixture of anxiety and delight at what is unfolding in front of her. Watching from the outside, the girl sees a picture as if torn from legend. A huge monster with claws comparable to its head is rushing to meet the young hero, who stands steadfastly with a briefcase in his hands, ready for a confrontation. The system voice injects realism into this fantasy, warning that an enemy whose level cannot be determined is becoming unattainable for victory, as if a sentence pronounced from unknown heights. The hero recalls the instructions of his teacher, who always emphasized that they should not face such powerful opponents at their level, words that echo in his mind like a bell. Despair and determination intertwine in his thoughts as he realizes that if he cannot avoid the battle, there is only one way to go: straight into the danger. The same lesson he learned when he first heard about the method that is now to become his key to defeating the monster. The player focuses on every word of the sage, preparing to put the knowledge into practice. Diving into the depths of his inventory, he pulls out a bottle of the highest quality lubricant, a universal remedy that can be decisive in this battle. The first gesture of the lycanthrope's aggression is a huge leap, during which he bends down, preparing to deliver a fatal blow, all enveloped in anticipation of violence. With incredible agility, the player dodges the attack, taking refuge behind the beast's back, as if dancing with death, where every step makes all the difference. At the moment when the lycanthrope lands, preparing for another rapid dash, the player seizes his chance by spilling lube right in front of it, a trap hidden in wait. And so the monster's foot steps on the slippery trap, instantly losing traction, forcing it to seek balance at the last decisive moment. At the critical moment, when the lycanthrope loses its balance on the slippery surface, the player strikes with all his might right into the monster's stomach, using the moment of surprise to his advantage. The force of the blow, enhanced by the elixir, is incredible, allowing the player not only to strike, but also to cause significant damage to the huge creature. Remembering the teacher's advice to use the size of the enemy against him, the player resorts to a trick, deciding to make the huge enemy lose his balance and fall into the water. This plan is realized with amazing accuracy, using the monster's weaknesses to the player's advantage. The girl sitting next to him is filled with disbelief at what she has seen, because just a few minutes ago, a horrifying scene was unfolding before her eyes. Once in the water, the lycanthrope begins to feel electrical impulses running through its body, causing it to shrink in size and lose its power. Watching this, the girl notices how the powerful enemy becomes much smaller, taking on the appearance of an ordinary wolf. Water always has this effect on them. Now his strength has decreased significantly. He looks more like an ordinary wolf, the player explains, sharing his observations with the girl. It seems to her as if he has mastered some kind of martial art, and she does not hold back from asking about it. But the player smiles, answering that he was just preparing for an exam. Following him, she jokingly says that he is a real hero, as if from a movie. You go boom bang and then bam. These words make him smile sincerely, because such a turn of events would seem unbelievable even in his wildest dreams. Plunging into the waters where the lycanthrope has lost its power, the player draws his sword, and then everything happens as you might expect, a decisive blow that puts an end to the battle. First a huge beast and now just a helpless wolf lying motionless. Its death is a testament to the player's wit and strategic thinking. Success in the battle gives the player a well-deserved level increase, up to 13, marking his growing skill. But this is only the beginning. The first level up is soon followed by others, first to 14, then to 15, each of which is accompanied by windows with messages about new achievements. Having received the title of Excellent Hunter, the player also wins a hidden figure of a lycanthrope, which becomes a testament to his victory over a powerful enemy. The bonuses and coins keep coming, and messages from other bosses in the game's world, the woman with the scales, the unknown observer, and the brave Lion King, show their admiration for his actions. It would seem that even the game administrator was not indifferent to this event, appearing near the player as if to anticipate his success. She not only confirms his new level, but also prepares to reveal to him the secrets of the item store that opens thanks to his new achievements. At first, the player doubts the availability of this new feature, but the administrator quickly dispels his doubts, assuring him of the opportunities that are opening up. In the item store, players can use the coins they earn to purchase special items. Studying the assortment of the store, the player comes to the conclusion that 4 items will be more than enough for the training area for the upcoming challenges. The administrator suddenly interrupts his thoughts with a personal question. She wonders if the player can share his real name, adding a touch of mystery to their interaction. The player, a little surprised by this question, answers evasively, noting the indirect signs of curiosity on the part of the administrator, despite her attempts to hide it. Without wasting a moment, the administrator suggests checking other awards and titles, to which the player replies that he will do so personally, hinting at a desire to maintain a certain distance. The player decides not to reveal all the cards at once, preferring to maintain an atmosphere of mystery and intrigue. As he prepares to continue his journey, he shares his plans with the girl, who is curious about their next steps. They decide to go down to the dungeon, to the second floor of the tower, where new trials and adventures await them. On the second floor, a monster awaits them, much more dangerous than their previous opponents. This challenge is taken on by a warrior who, having gathered a team, finds himself in a lonely battle with a terrifying enemy, demonstrating courage and readiness to fight for a common goal. In the face of the unknown, the young man stood alone against the monster, face to face with danger. Rushing forward with all his strength, he threw a punch straight at the monster's head. The iron gloves on his hands did their job, increasing the damage. The answer was not long in coming. The giant goblin hit him right in the chest, and the retaliation was instant. Standing next to the giant, the young man could not believe that he had survived so many blows. The fight seemed like a battle against an unyielding wall. He needed a plan. He remembered a conversation with another player who had advised him to aim straight for the eye. His thoughts were interrupted by the goblin's fist, which suddenly appeared near his head. Gathering all his strength, he managed to avoid the blow, finding himself right under the giant's hand. However, the goblin's next punch hit him right in the head, and blood splattered. The power of the blow sent the young man flying away as if he were in a wind tunnel, losing control. The goblin's attention suddenly shifted to the appearance of a new player, adding tension to the already chaotic battle. When the player and his companion entered the boss zone, a message appeared before their eyes. Escape is possible only for the next 10 seconds. However, they were not facing a goblin, but a magic troll of an unknown level, a riddle waiting to be solved. The player, Yu Hung, who had just fought the goblin, lay moaning in pain, gripped by suffering after being hit by a powerful blow. The player's glance at Yu Hung revealed his helplessness. He was unconscious, surrendered to fate. Acting decisively, the player turned to his inventory and pulled out a weak healing potion, hoping for a miracle, even with the slightest of efforts. The man from Hyun's team, who was also badly injured, barely spoke a word, advising the player and the girl to run away as fast as possible. Seonghwa took the potion from the player and was ordered to distribute it to all the injured, including the young man, sharing the hope equally. The player was determined to fight the troll, while the others had to stay out of his way and provide rear guard. Thus, the player found himself face to face with a giant troll, the third monster on his path, but still undefeated. The boss of the second level of the tower was a mystery that seemed to be known best by the player who was ready for new challenges. It turned out that the troll's name glowed red, like a lycanthrope, signaling the extreme difficulty of defeating it. The red name meant that its level was so high that it could not be detected. Trolls are known for their survivability and endurance. Their property is their boss strength and resistance to physical attacks, making them difficult opponents. Yu Hung suffered almost no damage from melee, more from weapons. He sat leaning against the wall, barely feeling his body. The player, feeling no fear, armed himself with a sword and bravely moved to fight the troll. The people who had previously suffered from the troll's attack shouted at him, advising him to run away and save himself. The angry troll struck so hard that even the floor could not withstand it, breaking into pieces. The player knew his opponent well, which allowed him to predict that each subsequent blow of the troll would become slower. Before the troll knew it, the player was behind him, and the wind from the player's sword rustled next to his head, leaving a cut on it. The player did not have a clear strategy against the troll. The blow he struck was insignificant. It seemed that only constant attacks could work against such an opponent, giving him no chance to recover. The King of Fists, whom the player was familiar with, was able to defeat the troll and win the title thanks to one key advantage. He threw many punches in a row. This tactic was effective because the continuous rain of blows did not give the troll a chance to recover or counterattack. At the same time, the player's companion tirelessly distributed potions to everyone who needed help, trying to heal wounds and support the soldiers. During the clash, the player activates the effect of the Excellent Hunter, which allows him to predict the trajectories of the troll's attacks and dodge thanks to the points invested in agility. The player could relieve fatigue from the intense battle with the troll with the help of potions purchased in the store, which gave him a short-term recovery. Looking at the troll, the player noticed that the giant was starting to get tired. If you are careful, there is a chance to defeat him completely. The troll rushes at the player with all his might, starting a grueling battle where every blow counts. The battle was marked by blood splattering in all directions, leaving scattered traces on the ground and weapons. All the observers present were stunned and fascinated by the player's courage and endurance, wondering who he was. The battle had been going on for an hour, and the player was feeling very exhausted. His sword was covered in blood, evidence of a difficult struggle for victory. Every blow the player struck at the troll was proof of incredible endurance and strength. Observers could not believe that an ordinary person was capable of such a thing, but few knew about his true level. Among the spectators, there was a man who noted that this player was much stronger than Yu Heng, whose fame was known far beyond the battle. The troll, although receiving numerous blows, was still standing, although he could barely hold on. Suddenly, a message appears on the screen stating that the troll's regeneration ability has disappeared, giving the player the advantage. In the past, as a top player, he could never have imagined facing such a dangerous opponent. Kim Hyuk-jin, once a civil servant, turned into a player, changing his fate and taking on a new role. The player realized that the clock was ticking, and with 15 minutes left, he raised his sword above his head, preparing to deliver the last, decisive blows. The player was surprised by a window that appeared above him, informing him that the brave Lion King wanted to help him by granting him the gift of outstanding strength. The power of the player's next attack increased by 100%, giving him confidence in his movements. A thought flashed through the player's mind, mixed with surprise and disbelief. Why now? But he quickly focused on the goal. Using this incredible gift, the player deals double damage to the troll, making the most of the advantage he has gained. At this point, the damage count lost all meaning, as the player skillfully sliced through the troll from the top of its head to the bottom of its body, causing blood to gush from its nose, beard, and neck. Despite all the difficulties, this was a clear victory for the player over one of the strongest enemies on his path, causing the audience to have mixed feelings of admiration and relief. The troll, falling to his knees, began to howl in pain and despair, having suffered unspeakable suffering at the hands of his victor. The mystery remained. Why did the Lion King decide to help the player? This accidental help changed the course of the battle, raising many questions. Standing in front of the giant, the player had a unique opportunity to end the life of his powerful enemy, making the troll his first significant victory. However, red energy suddenly flashed above the troll, hinting at an unexpected turn of events. The player, realizing the danger, realized that his plan had failed, and now the only way out was to immediately flee the battlefield. Yu Heng, who had previously fought the troll, was lying on the ground, barely opening his eyes, when a girl with a potion approached him, bringing him hope for salvation. With great difficulty, he gathered the last of his strength to get up and sit down, eagerly asking the girl about the monster's fate, to which she replied by pointing in the direction of the boss. Looking at the troll, they both realized that they were facing not just any enemy, but the boss himself. A completely different, unknown energy suddenly flashes over the troll, changing the atmosphere around it. The bow is held with tension and a decisive shot is made. The player turns around, not expecting this development. He thinks pensively, who could have done that? The arrow pierces the troll's head with incredible accuracy, hitting it right in the eye. Standing in front of the troll, the player sees a young man with a bow behind him, who has just made a good shot. After killing the troll, the archer explains that he couldn't let anyone else take their prey because they were the first to arrive. The player thinks anxiously about his achievements, which can now be taken away by this stranger. He calls out to the young gunslinger to flee, but the latter, not understanding, asks, "What?" The player repeats his warning more decisively, emphasizing the impossibility of protecting him in this situation. A message appears on the screen. Boss Magic Troll has lost his mind. The boss is going berserk. At the crucial moment, the player rushes to Xianghua, shouting that they need to run away immediately. They run away together, because the boss's loss of sanity causes the boss zone to vanish into thin air. An escalator to the first floor appears in front of them. The mini-boss area of the tower, which can accommodate up to 15 people, has no limit for going down. The young man who shot the boss in the eye with an arrow also tries to escape, but the boss grabs him by the head with one hand and slams him to the floor with terrifying force, crushing his head. Yu Hyun finds himself right behind the monster, who turns his head in his direction, causing Yu Hyun to feel imminently threatened. The player and Xianghua speed up their run to the escalator, hoping to escape the boss's uncontrollable rage. In this moment, the player realizes that he has made a mistake, allowing the situation to get out of hand. He realizes that the chaotic events caused by the greed of the other players are partly his fault, as he did not take them into account in his plan. Now that the boss zone has disappeared and the boss has entered the berserker state, he is not limited to the second floor. Upon reaching the entrance to the escalator, the player turns to Seonghua, saying that they need to go downstairs immediately. On the second floor of the parking garage is a safe zone, which the player prefers for their temporary shelter. That's where they should go now to avoid further danger. A troll suddenly starts chasing them, appearing behind them so quickly that they don't even have time to realize it. Their situation on the second floor becomes even more desperate, and the realization that everyone else is already dead only adds to the horror. With all his might, the troll rushes at them, intending to deliver a devastating blow. The girl, at the last moment, makes a desperate jump after the player, who meanwhile falls on the escalator steps. In the air, the player manages to grab her, saving her from the blow, and lies down on his back, ready to take the full impact. The situation becomes critical. If the troll touches them at least once more, it could be the end of them. The troll is now right in front of the stairs. They have almost reached the place. They only have to go through the door to the parking lot to avoid danger. But as they approach the door, the system suddenly detects a critical situation. It starts checking the conditions of a unique situation, a forced awakening due to an unusual meeting with the boss. This message appears at the exact moment when the troll, standing right behind them, swings his fist. At a critical moment, when the player is about to face certain death, Seonghwa suddenly appears in front of him, putting her hand in front of the troll's powerful punch. The energy of her defense, shining with a bright blue light, defies logic and explanation. Thus begins the decisive moment of their escape. The troll, radiating threat, rushes at them with the intention of inflicting a devastating blow, shouting that they will all die. It is at this moment that the woman, symbolizing the Libra, impressed by Seonghwa's courage, decides to reward her with the ability Planning Shield. This skill, activated for the first time, manifests itself through a hitherto unknown physical force. The Planning Shield distributes the damage from the troll's blow, minimizing its effects. Seonghwa is thrown to the side by the force of the blow, but the player, amazed by her ability and not understanding how she did it, now holds her in his arms unconscious. Despite the collision, the troll does not stop and continues to attack them. The player, realizing that every second counts, picks up Seonghwa and rushes to the parking lot, their last safe haven. When he reaches the glass door, he ducks down with her body in his arms and slams his back into the door with all his might, breaking the glass and paving the way to freedom. With great difficulty they manage to get out, and the player, cautiously making sure they are safe, looks back to see where the troll is now. They found themselves in an additional security zone, and the troll, irritated to the point of annoyance, remained behind the glass. Unable to break through the glass, he growls, standing on the other side like a prisoner of his own aggression. They are lucky that the troll, despite its strength, cannot penetrate the security zone. However, there are monsters that can ignore such zones. The Berserker state, as it turns out, does not give the troll the ability to pass through the glass, and it attacks it powerlessly, enraged. Seonghwa, who sacrificed herself to save them, now lies unconscious in his arms. Her small hands, which she used to stop the attack, have been crippled. The player can hardly believe her bravery. How Seonghwa got this skill remains a mystery, but it saved them. The problem is that the distribution of damage could have damaged her brain. Given the troll's rapid transition to Berserker state, its health must have been critically low. It becomes too hard for the troll. His body is stretched to the limit, and blood is splattered in all directions. Eventually, only his legs remain, and his body explodes, putting an end to his furious anger. After a fierce battle, the magical troll was killed, activating a defense mechanism for players below level 20 who were near the monster. An administrator appears and informs the player Kim Hyuk-jin that the troll's killing is credited to him. The training area disappears into thin air after the death of the training boss, signifying the successful completion of the introductory quest. The future difficulty level will be determined by the number of survivors in the training area. There are 5,087 survivors, which results in a low difficulty level. The results of the training phase are being summarized, but Kim's thoughts are focused elsewhere, on Seonghwa, who is unconscious in his arms. All participants receive a system reward, 1,000 coins and a set of armor for beginners. Individual awards will be given by mid-level administrators. The level limit for players who have completed the training has been removed. Kim Hyuk-jin receives an award after completing the training, and his name appears in the Hall of Fame. At this critical moment, Kim's main goal is to save Seonghwa, and everything else fades into the background. He turns to the administrator, reminding her of the deal she had previously offered him. And now he is ready to accept its terms if only to save Seonghwa. The administrator asks if Kim is sure about his decision to accept the deal, since the store's rank will increase over time after he graduates, and all he has to do is wait. However, Kim could not wait. He was not interested in general terms and conditions, because he needed an exclusive contract that would allow him to purchase 10 medicinal potions immediately. According to the terms of the contract between the player and the administrator, the guardians can only observe the player through the prism of this administrator. The more attention the player attracts, the more money the administrator receives. Kim realizes that his name is already associated with problems, which only increases his value in the game. He explains to the administrator that he doesn't have time to wait. Opening the flask with the medicine, Kim gives Seonghwa a drink, realizing that he owes her his life, because without her sacrifice he would not have survived the encounter with the troll. She had already drunk more than 3 flasks of medicine. Sitting next to her, Kim holds Seonghwa in his arms, trying to wake her up. Suddenly, she opens her eyes wide and takes a deep breath, as if she can't believe she's alive. She sits up, recovering from her shock, and Kim tells her that what she did was incredible. Seeing the 3 flasks of medicine next to her, Seonghwa realizes that Kim gave them to her to save her life. She reminds him of what he said about leaving her if he had his own problems. Kim is silent at first, then turns away, but eventually says that it would be a shame to leave her after everything she has been through. "You didn't leave me," she says, and begins to cry with happiness. Administrator Senya is preparing to announce the individual awards, but Kim interrupts her, asking about the store's ranking. He points out that they didn't sign anything, to which Senya reacts with surprise. She is outraged at how easily he deceived her, as a document had to be signed to activate the deal. This becomes a rookie mistake for Senya's administrator. Seonghwa, standing next to Kim and leaning lightly against him, looks like a heroine next to her savior. Kim asks the administrator to give out individual awards. Senya, agreeing with the request, begins the process of awarding Kim, recognizing his contribution and bravery. 2 windows with awards suddenly appeared in front of Kim, letting him know that he had hit the jackpot. The 7-day training ended, and the surviving players received rewards that matched their achievements. Kim understands that achieving such success is impossible without knowledge of battle strategy. The impact of his actions on the course of the training was enormous, and he hopes that the reward will match this contribution. The administrator appeared, recognizing him as an excellent hunter, and suggested that Kim check his rank. Kim quickly opened the rewards window, ready to see the results of his efforts. Even the title of Excellent Hunter was already something special for a player, but what was assigned to Kim exceeded all his expectations. He saw the conditions for raising his rank. One of these conditions included defeating a lycanthrope immediately after reaching level 10, a task that seemed almost impossible. Kim could never have imagined that it was possible to get such an outstanding rank in this game. He looks again at the 2 open reward windows, and realizes that even the title for killing the lycanthrope pales in comparison to the last reward he received. The award Kim received was called Unification. It was given for his ability to overcome a deadly situation by using his 6th sense and fulfilling the conditions of unification. Little was known about such an award, and the information available was hardly ever kept, making this method of enhancement rare even among elite players. Kim gained access to the 6th sense unification gained in the battle with the troll. He was also offered the Eye of the Cold-Blooded Observer, a reward from beta testing, or as a bonus for excellent training, along with other titles. A window appeared with a suggestion to merge 6th sense unification and Eye of the Cold-Blooded Observer, to which Kim clicks yes. He waits for the merging effect to activate. Suddenly, his attention is distracted by severe pain in his heart. The pain becomes so indescribable that Kim feels like his heart is going to explode. The process of unification is accompanied by incredible agony, and he fears that he may die if he does not endure it. Blood spurts out of his mouth as Seonghwa rushes to his side, trying to support him as best she can, even though she doesn't understand what's happening. 2 messages appear on the screen. The merger was successful, and Kim receives the Eyes of Perception, a new ability that will undoubtedly change his fate in this world. Opening his eyes, Kim realizes that he is lying on a bed, but the area around him is not like the game world. He finds himself in a hospital, which shocks him. He can't believe he's alive after such an ordeal. His sister is sitting next to him, worried about his condition. His sister is a devoted and attentive person whose character can change depending on the circumstances. And as it turns out, such information is now available to Kim thanks to his newly acquired ability, Eyes of Perception. She immediately starts asking him how he could have taken such a reckless risk, going to school and disappearing for a whole Sunday. After a short conversation, the sister leaves the room, leaving Kim alone with his thoughts. But before she leaves, she expresses relief that he is still alive. Left alone outside the door, she thinks that Kim would be better off dead if he is going to risk his life again, because it is extremely difficult for her to worry about him. Kim looks around and notices a message box in front of her. The screen indicates that the merging process was completed when he lost consciousness, which explains his current condition and sudden transfer to the hospital. The new ability allowed Kim to feel his sister crying, which hurt him because he never wanted to see her in tears. Now, as one of the most popular and powerful players, Kim is able to change his family's life for the better by freeing his sister from having to work at the factory and helping his mother. They will finally have a chance to live as a real family, and Kim feels a responsibility to make it possible. His mother enters the ward to see her son. Seonghwa runs in after her happily, and her exclamations echo throughout the hospital. She hugs Kim, expressing her boundless joy, and admits that she was afraid for his life. Now Kim realizes that he has returned to the past. The 7 days of training is an event with a terrifying survival rate that is remembered even after decades, a test of talent and luck. However, Kim managed not only to survive, but also to gain incredible abilities that he could not have imagined. A month after the Cheongno disaster, the whole country learned the truth about the events in Seoul through news reports about an anonymous phenomenon known as the apprenticeship. On the anniversary of the drill incident, the reporters invited a special guest to discuss the events of that terrible day. Upon entering the studio, he was immediately introduced as a hero who not only survived the deadly drill, but also took leadership in the most difficult conditions, helping many people. Mr. Soo Yoo-hyun took his seat at the table, collecting his thoughts. According to the survivors who met him, he played a key role in those events, the reporter said. He also recalled the scary goblins or wolves carrying weapons in their hands, and how Soo saved people at the risk of his own life. He added that he had been honored with the title of trained, recognizing his heroism. But Soo sat silent as he remembered Kim and Seung-hwa, the outstanding player and the small but strong-minded girl. He humbly admitted that he was just lucky, and that the real heroes were others, not him, despite attempts to take all the credit. But modesty is often considered a sign of a hero, and it's obvious to everyone that you are the hero of this story, the reporter disagreed, turning his attention back to Soo. No, I'm not, Soo argued, emphasizing that rejecting fame is not modesty. He then told the story of the boy and girl who were also there with him, emphasizing their important role in the group's survival. They successfully defeated the troll, but he, as a top-level player, admitted that without them, he would have died. He frankly said that his life would have been lost if not for them. With his hand clenched in a fist in front of the cameras, he made a promise to repay them in the future. The scene changes. A small gate appears at the second entrance of Seoul Station on June 7th, leading to the station's dungeon. People panic and avoid this portal, not knowing where they should go. A girl asks Kim if they are going to enter it. Standing in front of her, he replies that of course they will enter the dungeons of Seoul Station, because channel number 19207 is open. Kim knows that many players in the future have come here to level up, because if you know the right way to clear it, it's even easier than D-Tower. They started their journey, but Kim hears a warning that it is advisable to have at least 7 players to enter. The mid-level administrator who appeared before him repeated this warning, emphasizing its importance. The administrator warned that it was extremely dangerous to enter the dungeon alone, advising them to return with a larger group. Despite the warning, Kim and Seung-hwa left the safe zone, ignoring her warning. Turning back to the receptionist, Kim told her not to forget that he would demonstrate his skill in the game without even remembering her. The scene shifts to Yoido's business district, where the player encounters the owner of a game development company. The player refuses to follow the path he has laid out, deciding to follow his own course. Once outside, he realizes how much the world has changed. Weak monsters such as slimes have begun to appear even outside the dungeons. Portals similar to those in Chono have appeared at the train station. The player realizes that the first dungeon of Seoul Station has opened after the training. Its administrator turned out to be Neptune, a mid-level administrator. He offered the player to take the training, mentioning that it requires a team of 7 people. The administrator received a notification that 2 had already entered the dungeon and urged the player to find 4 more companions. He emphasized the need to increase the team for safe passage. A table appeared on the administrator's screen, showing that the dungeon would collapse if it was not defended in time, allowing monsters to escape. Only players can clear the dungeon. In the dungeon, Kim and Seung-hwa move forward cautiously. He reminds the girl to watch her step. The Seoul Station dungeon resembled a cold, damp cave. Kim activated his eye of perception, carefully examining his surroundings for threats. In the first half of the journey, there were none. A status window appeared in front of Seung-hwa, showing that at the age of 14, she had already reached level 15. Suddenly, she noticed something in front of her. They came across a crossroads of 7 paths, where each path offered different directions. Each of the 7 paths led to caves where various items could be found, and that is why it is recommended to have at least 7 players in the team. It turned out that when each player stood on his or her own magic circle, a path through the difficulties would open up for 7 participants above level 10. Regardless of the path they chose, the risk of dying remained high since it was just the 2 of them. Senya watched them, sharing their fears and reflections. Kim, gathering his courage, asked Seung-hwa to wait and went ahead, promising to return quickly. Approaching the circle drawn on the floor, he stepped on it, activating the first path of the dungeon, the path of Nepharis. The player realized that if he was here, then there must be another path for his fellow player somewhere nearby. At Seoul Station, there was a fork in the road with 7 paths, each of which had to be cleared to get through the dungeon. The main problem was that all 7 rewards were important for complete clearing. When the player entered one of the paths, The difficulty was automatically adjusted to 7 people. Kim activated the second fork, the arc path. He used a path activation mechanism that automatically adjusts the difficulty. On the 7 paths, the difficulty was adjusted for 7 people. But if one path was already activated with this difficulty, the overall difficulty decreased with each subsequent activated circle, making the task a little easier. Kim realized that by activating all 7 circles, the difficulty of each path would drop to level 1, making the task much easier. He approached Seonghwa, explaining that the rules of the dungeon do not require that all paths be completed simultaneously. So this strategy is quite possible. They were faced with the question of whether to choose the path called Nefars, and the choice was made in favor of yes. Meanwhile, other events were unfolding on the streets where the other player was located. People were panicked, not understanding what was happening. The police started investigating the situation at Seoul Station. The player immediately thought that they were investigating the gate to the dungeon. A figure appeared in front of the police in the form of a guy with a devil's tail and red horns on his head. His skin was red and his feet did not touch the ground, as if he was floating in the air. The police shouted at him to stop and identify himself. The player recognized the person he had met in the training area. It was a mid-level administrator named Chris. It became obvious that if Chris appeared here, there must be another player nearby, because mid-level administrators do not appear without a reason. A group of policemen warns him with a tense voice that they intend to open fire, urging him not to approach. In response, Chris grabs his opponent by the collar and asks him with a challenge what he can do to counter him. Then lifting him high by the throat, Chris arrogantly asks his opponent to try something against him. At the same time, 2 policemen nearby, frightened, watch the scene idly. One of the police officers, hoping to regain control, warns of an imminent shooting attack if Chris does not release the hostage. But when the fire is opened, Chris creates a protective shield of his energy that deflects the bullets, causing them to ricochet. With concentration, Chris creates blood drops on his fingertips that he can manipulate. He controls these blood drops, catches the bullets flying in his direction, and directs them back toward the police. As they approach the police, the bullets begin to detonate, mercilessly taking lives one by one. For Chris, this turns into a morbid amusement. He sees people only as toys for his cruel games, enjoying their suffering. As he concludes his brutal display of power, Chris approaches a new caller, suggesting that they start a new game. The player, staring intently into Chris's eyes, ponders the answer, hesitating on how best to respond to his offer. Chris's unexpected ally turns out to be another player named Suju Hwan, standing next to him. The player is not at all surprised to meet Suju Hwan here, as if he could sense their upcoming meeting. As he approaches, Suju Hwan reveals that they last saw each other about a month ago at Tower D, the place where their adventures began. Not only has he not seen the player since then, but he's also encountered goblins, and he can't shake the encounter from his memory, which has clearly left an imprint. That episode, when they faced the blood-soaked monsters together, some of whom were running away and they were eager to fight, was marked by a thirst for competition. This encounter reminded us that despite some of the fear this player evokes, he undoubtedly has impressive skills. Chris notes that a player of his caliber could not help but notice the changes taking place in the world, and asks Su's opinion on this. The changes in question are related to the increasing number of blue portals that keep appearing and affecting reality, making it unpredictable. In the end, Su addresses the player with a proposal. To complete the dungeon, they need to assemble a team of 7 people, hinting at the difficult challenges that lie ahead. Pointing to a group of people standing behind him, Su noted that they only had 6 people and offered to join them to complete the team. The conversation between the players ended, and the scene switched to the dungeon where Kim and Sung found themselves fighting against the level 12 Black Yaks. The Black Yaks are rushing forward, their strong hooves pounding the ground, creating a loud noise. Kim uses his sword with incredible skill, deftly destroying one yak after another, demonstrating his fighting skills. Their size is impressive. These are not the usual wolves that the heroes might be used to, but real monsters. Like a superhero, Kim pounces on each of the enemies with heroic courage, demonstrating phenomenal agility and strength. For each enemy he defeats, Kim gains experience that allows him to develop and become stronger. After he defeated about 30 Jacob, he was rewarded with 12 coins, which testifies to his success in battle. Impressed by his spectacular yet effective strikes, Mala asks him about his fighting technique as she has never seen such skill before. She notes that although she has met other players with excellent technique, this is the first time she has seen Kim's strikes that easily scatter enemies, demonstrating her admiration for his unique skills. The administrator overhears their conversation, and when the question of how to achieve Kim's skill comes up, she can't help but be curious. Kim, approaching the administrator and answering Malia at the same time, explains that due to the large number of bystanders and guards, he cannot openly share his secret. However, he encourages her to continue training, assuring her that perseverance will definitely pay off. The administrator, watching this scene, is impressed by Kim's skill and Mala's interest. Mala asks if the secret is just practice, and Kim answers in the affirmative. He emphasizes the importance of not regretting anything and always doing your best, because in his previous life it was easier for him because of the experience he had gained. As they talk, Mala notices a ring with a green diamond flying in the distance. Kim waited patiently for the moment when the ring came into their field of vision. After the path was cleared, Seong-hui declares that it's time to head to fork number 2. Looking to the side, Mala notices a few surviving Jacobites, but is told not to kill them all. As she continues on her way, Kim warns her that they are not alone in this dungeon, hinting at unseen threats or possible allies. The scene switches to the other players, who are also traveling through the dungeon's maze. One of them remarks that the dungeon under the Seoul train station is much different from the challenges they faced in the tower, in particular because of its cavernous structure, and asks Soo Yu-hyun if it makes him feel nostalgic. Soo Yu-hyun sadly recalls his past experience in this dungeon, which he does not associate with anything good. Back then, they lost more than a dozen comrades, and he himself was unable to defeat the monster because of his own mistakes. Another player interrupts him, emphasizing the need to move on and clear the dungeon of threats to everyone's safety. The group of 7 continues on their way through the dungeon, demonstrating team spirit and mutual assistance. Suddenly, one of the participants calls on the others to pay attention to the crossroads in front of them, where there are 7 different passages. They begin to look at the glowing circles placed in front of each entrance, trying to decipher their meaning. One of the players suggests taking the fork in the road number 1, called the Nafarsa path, as the most hopeful option. Meanwhile, Kim and Seong-hwa continue their search for artifacts and find a magical necklace with a red stone that stands out for its beauty. Taking the necklace in her hands, Kim feels that it appeared much faster than the ring, hinting at the mystery surrounding this artifact. Mala, curious, asks if they can now take the 3rd path. Kim agrees, noticing that she is beginning to understand the importance of key items in their journey. She realizes that obtaining these items is far more important than aimlessly destroying monsters, emphasizing a strategic approach to survival. Seong-hwa apologizes and returns to Kim, explaining her slowness and apologizing for the delay. She recounts how, during the battle with the yaks, when she was breaking the horn of one of them, she felt that she was falling behind, seeing how Kim easily dealt with several at once. Expressing her doubts about her own effectiveness, Seong-hwa reflects that perhaps Kim could have done it alone. Kim, reassuring her, emphasizes that there is no need to talk nonsense and emphasizes the importance of each team member, including her, and leads the group down the 3rd path. They see a fork in the road number 3, which leads to Daransha Road. What he sees makes Seong-hwa take a deep breath, preparing for new challenges. Purple yaks with 3 horns of the 14th level appear on their way, posing a new challenge to the group. But the most surprising thing is the enemy that can shoot its horns, with its eyes glowing a menacing red color, promising danger and a difficult battle. Unexpectedly, Yak's horn flies straight at Molly's head, creating a moment of tension. Concerned, Kim asks if she is hurt badly, to which she responds in the negative, demonstrating her resilience. They realize that the purple yaks can shoot with their horns, which is an effective ranged attack, and this must be factored into their strategy. Kim puts his hand on Mala's shoulder to express his trust in her, signaling her importance in this situation. Mala can't help but smile when she hears Kim call her the big tank, which lifts her spirits. She has to fight off the horns that are constantly flying in her direction with courage and agility. Using her hands, she skillfully parries the attacks, protecting herself and her team. Standing behind her, Kim cheers her on, noting her ability to deflect attacks better than he expected, although Mala asks him not to say this just for motivation. Mala uses the shield she received as a bonus while defending herself against the troll, effectively using it against enemy attacks. At one point, all the yaks gather together, mobilizing their full strength for a massive attack, creating a tense atmosphere of anticipation for the decisive battle. They let out their horns in the direction of the girl. She had to defend herself as best she could. Speed, reflexes, everything made her thirsty for victory. But at one point, she noticed something strange. Her attention was drawn to some unusual element in the middle of the battle. Perhaps it was a key detail that would help her win. All the monsters were lying on the floor, dead. It was an unexpected turn of events. Why were they falling so fast? Was it part of the enemy's strategy? Purple dies when 2 horns are fired, Kim explained to her. This was important information. Her fate in the game depended on it. And then the right thing appeared. The bracelet. She felt that it was something important, so she took it without hesitation. Kim came up to her and took the bracelet in his hand. There were only 4 items left. This find could change the course of the game. The girl showed her interest in the survey. Maybe we should fight a few more yaks, she suggested. But Kim advised against it, reminding her that other players might show up. Meanwhile, on the other side of the court, other players are fighting their enemies. One of them shouts for help, emphasizing the complexity of the situation. Su decided to take the initiative and attacked the yak. His punch right in the beard was impressive. The other players were impressed by the blow. Realizing that this fighter had a higher level of skill, one of them took the horn, feeling its weight. They realized that horns were valuable loot. They had found a weakness thanks to the corpses. But they realized that the horns brought little pull and left it. They turned to Su, asking what he thought. Su agreed that they had not found anything of value. Even defeating all the yaks hadn't given them anything of value, which was strange. There was no point in staying. They chose the second road, hoping for the best. On this road they were met by black yaks, as well as many corpses without horns, which looked strange. They realized that this was a very unusual situation. They had 2 options. Either they took the reward to them. Jib Vyukub expect them further ahead. However, it was unlikely that they were the only group to enter the dungeon. However, it's hard to imagine that anyone could have cleared the dungeon faster than Su Yu-hyun, who was with them. He thought that someone was ahead of him and already halfway through. He turned to the players with a suggestion. Let's try another way, that was plan B. He took the dagger and was ready to continue on his way, thinking about the possible omission. At the fork in the road number 6, a Victoria's shield was waiting for them. Kim and Sung eliminated them one by one. After killing the yaks, a window with the words Pole appeared in front of him, and Victoria's shield shone yellow. He thought about giving this shield to the girl he now called his tank because of her character, but the shield was too fragile to use as real armor. Soon new awards appeared. Athena's necklaces from the 4th fork and Zenith's club from the 5th. The text, and Victoria's shield from fork 6 inches can be shortened to Victoria's shield from fork 6. She felt tired, realizing that they had traveled a difficult path and defeated numerous monsters, with only one last important item left on their journey. Kim suggested that they continue on their way to clear the dungeon as much as possible, and everything looked pretty good. It was their last journey. Suddenly the girl looked up in surprise. Among the group of players was Su Yu-hyun. Kim expected them to be caught up, but it happened much later than he expected. He assumed that the newcomers had caught up with them.